the more that businesses realize the risk of not doing anything, then the risk of actually going on the journey and implementing change is far higher to just sit there and keep doing what you're doing than it is to actually try something new. And it may not work 100% of the time, because humans are humans. You know, we all show up to work probably differently every day, but if we have a shared overarching set of values that we actually live and breathe and adhere to, and that we are held accountable to, then that journey makes it a little bit easier.
Hi, my name is Anita Nowak, and I'm the author of this book. Welcome to Season 12 of Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand that the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I'm joined by Sophie Bretag, who is a workplace kindness and connection specialist. Her kindness and well-being consultancy combines over 15 years of executive human resources experience with happiness coaching, meditation, breathwork, EQ, and positive psychology. And I will have the link to your website, but your LinkedIn and website, colorful, vibrant, energetic. It's just something worth taking a look at. Sophie was recently announced as a global award finalist in Women Changing the World Awards. Congratulations. Her mission, and you must check this out. I love this. Her mission is to create a global kindness revolution where organizations embrace cultures of kindness with whole humanness at their heart. I love it. Welcome to the show, Sophie.
Thanks, Anita. Oh my gosh, I feel like what an introduction, but it is exactly what I live for. It lights me up, and I'm just so excited to be here with you today, or tonight where you are, but today where I am.
Yeah, and I'm going to start actually by saying that my first impression of you was obviously through your LinkedIn and website, which, of course, for me, made me want to meet you and hang out with you for it, whether it was a latte or a glass of wine. You're in Australia, so maybe, some
virtual.
But yeah, exactly. But then I also had another impression of you, which just, I thought, cemented that you walk the talk. And that is because of the time zone difference, you being in the morning on the following day for me, and me being yesterday night for you.
I know.
All of a sudden, I realized at the very last minute that I hadn't set an alarm, and I was about to completely miss our call, but I wasn't ready for it. And you were so gracious, and you said, this is going to happen when it happens, and we can reschedule. And you were just incredibly gracious. So I just want to thank you from the onset. And then a third thing that I want to point out to anybody listening and watching is that I typically invite any guest to fill out the guest form, and they can suggest 2 to 3, 4 to 5 questions that they think will highlight some of their work and how it relates to purposeful empathy, obviously. And I just want to read back what you wrote, because you might not remember, and it's
no, I don't.
It's so refreshing.
Because it would have been from the heart.
Yeah. You said, I work well in flow. So I'm happy if Anita asks me anything about kindness or kind leadership or mental health or workplace happiness. Let's just go for the flow. So this is going to be 100% organic. We're going to have a conversation about whatever needs to show up, and I'm going to trust that what needs to show up will show up. And Sophie, why are you on a mission to create a global kindness movement?
It's a big feeling inside that I tried to ignore for quite a few years working in corporate, where I saw not only unkind leadership happening, but also leaders being very, very unkind to themselves. When I speak about kindness and what it means to me, it literally is at the core of everything that I do. And I suppose when I started to look at, so coming from the aged care sector, before that I worked in local government, I've worked with clients in banking and state government, and no matter where I was working or going in to do projects, people were burning out. There were obviously attraction and retention problems. There were, particularly in the caregiving sector, when I was in aged care, and my husband's a police officer as well, so with first responders, the people who give as part of their work are often the last ones to give to themselves. And so what I was seeing were leaders who were showing up, trying to hold it all together, trying to just slap the mask on, show up to work, get everything done. And yet in that process, they were not taking care of themselves. And then that flow-on effect was they weren't being able to work as productively in an engaged manner in some circumstances. And some of them weren't lasting the duration in a sector or a job that they actually genuinely loved, but they weren't able to keep going because their emotional tanks were below empty. And then COVID arrived, which added a whole nother layer of complexity to how leaders were showing up, how people were showing up, the expectations on people, their own expectations of themselves, change fatigue, being in a heightened state of anxiety and wondering what was going to come next. And at that stage, my husband also became quite unwell mentally. And so I really thought, how can I create something that is meaningful, that has a far-reaching effect, and that at the end of the day can help people be more mentally healthy, more well within themselves, but also more engaged and more productive within a workplace, because the return on investment for well leaders, so well leaders lead well. And so if we take care of ourselves as leaders, or if we have the tools and the modalities to do that, then I felt that I could impact more people and help more people and really keep people in their line of work that they love and that they want to do for an extended period of time. So it comes from a deep-seated passion and drive and a deep knowing, probably like you are with your work, this deep knowing inside that we can do things differently, and it doesn't have to be seen as weak or not as effective. In fact, it's probably far more powerful and has a better return on investment than pushing through and then burning people out or burning ourselves out.
So if we've kind of figured out that the model, the track that we've been on is causing burnout, is causing climate change, is causing a mental health crisis, is causing all sorts of, secondary unintended consequences. Why is there still so much resistance or skepticism about work like yours or mine? Like, we get it maybe, but there are also people who are like, oh, we're a high performance culture. So what you're saying sounds fantastic, but we got KPIs.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. So important.
Okay,
so important.
I'll ask you to answer that or respond to that, but then also, just for fun, to get into philosophy, I kind of feel like, can we properly change some of the dynamics in organizations for more wellness, for more kindness, for more empathy, without eventually hitting a ceiling where we actually have to change the system? Just curious.
Great questions. I love them. There's obviously quite a few parts to those questions. So I'm going to start with some of the barriers to why empathy, kindness, love, compassion, why I feel that there are still probably more skeptics than people who support it. I feel like there is so much pressure on us externally, from the media, from our friends and family, from whatever cultural way we've been brought up, to not only be on, but when we're on, to keep pushing and to succeed. And so we look for these extrinsic ways that we can bring purpose and meaning into our lives. So if I buy the next amazing car, I'll look more successful. If I have my children in a particular school, I will look more successful. If I achieve, climbing the corporate ladder, I will be more successful. And yes, on the surface, you absolutely do look more successful, because you look more successful than perhaps your neighbor who has a smaller home or has a less expensive car. But when it's in the workplace and we're showing up with the only end game as, I want more notoriety and I want more money, but I don't really know inside what's driving me or what I really need for my own health and well-being, you can continue to be driven by those external factors. And I think that a lot of people, particularly when we are constantly shown a model of what success looks like, I mean, how many people do you see who are traveling the world and taking their rest and looking after themselves? Really, when I think about the types of people in the media, are we glorifying the people who have lots of money and are flying on the expensive jets, private jets, and have all the expensive clothing and all the expensive bits and pieces? That is still glorified, I believe, in the media. And what we see, we become, or we aspire to become. And so I think we have got to, and this is really my personal opinion on it, to start looking at, we are whole humans. We are not the things on the outside of us. We are the things that make ourselves up, that we can then create social change and connect on a more deep level with people, to be able to implement and increase the happiness of the world, rather than glorifying how much money we can make. I don't think that you and I, and hopefully, I mean, we have this big, beautiful vision of what we feel we would love the world and the workplaces to become. It's a big journey, because to get from over here where the business is, I'm making all this money, I'm really enjoying the outcome of having all this money, I have power, I have notoriety, and why would I change to over here where I'm potentially going to be less noticeable, less interesting to people, and maybe not seem as successful if I'm looking after my health and well-being as I am when I'm flying in my private jet. So I think the first thing there, and that's probably a long way to get there, but the first real problem, I think, is that in the media we glorify things that are extrinsic and external, rather than supporting and glorifying health, well-being. And when I talk about health and well-being, I don't mean just going out and going for a run. I mean genuinely living in alignment, doing what you love, what lights you up, and helping other people and connecting on a deep level with other people, because there is a financial return on investment for that. But I don't think businesses have yet caught up. A lot of them have caught up to the fact that over here, this is a power. This is a superpower. If you've got people over here who are aligned, living to their values, showing up as a whole human, connecting vulnerably and deeply, and showing compassion for other humans, how that can then drive innovation. You're going to have less attrition, less sick leave. You're going to have people who want to stay more engaged, who want to stay longer within your company. But I think the shift from over here to get to over here is a big ship to turn. And so I think that's the first hurdle, is changing that mindset around what does success look like. What was the second part of the question?
And then, is there a ceiling without changing the system in which we operate?
I feel you have to look at it holistically, and I feel that from my human resources background, having the appropriate systems and processes, policies, procedures, expectations, values, and living into those as an organization, it has a lot of facets that are attached to it, because you can't just show up all rainbows and sunshine and happiness, and you're not going to change a workplace culture just by doing that. It has to be incremental, systemic change. And I do believe that you can have some people within the organization who are really on board with the change. Like any change, change is hard. But I think those people are going to get to a point where, yes, they will hit somewhere within that company, whether it's other workmates, whether it's their leader even, whether it's the general manager, the CEO, someone at board level. There is always going to be that hierarchy of control where the people at the top, unfortunately, often have the most say over how the organisation should and will run. So I think there's two parts to that. Yes, I think there is a ceiling if you're trying to make change from the bottom up. I think you can show up as yourself as much as you possibly can. And interestingly enough, I listened to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they were talking about, it was a really interesting podcast. They were talking about how often in businesses we feel like we have no power, and how even if we don't think we have power, we actually have more power than we probably realize. So is that the power of being in the minority, so you actually understand more about the topic or what you're trying to implement and change? You have the power of being able to collaborate with people who are on your side, so that you create a shared power. You have a power of being able to impact via social media and media in general. So there were some really, there were about 6 different types of power. I can't remember all the other 3, but yes, you can implement a certain amount of change at your level and with those in your sphere of influence. But I feel that if you don't have the support from higher up to make those changes, then you're going to have difficulty. That's my opinion.
Hey there, I don't mean to interrupt a fabulous conversation. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that there are so many other great conversations on my YouTube channel. Over 120 episodes with already 25,000 views, completely organic. Thanks to you, my listeners, viewers, watchers. Please subscribe. The world needs more empathy, and you have a role to play.
So I imagine the business case that you put forth for kindness in the workplace is similar to what I would say about purposeful empathy. I wonder what your training is. Like, what do you do within organizations to bring that change into being, especially on a more sustained basis?
It's a journey. So when I partner with businesses, probably much like you do, is we work together to actually thread through the culture, the systems, the processes, and the way that people show up and that are expected, the way they're expected to show up. We actually work together collaboratively to do that. So it's not I go in and do a 3-hour or full day workshop and bam, we're all kind leaders. No, it is bumpy. It is difficult. It is uncomfortable. It takes commitment, and it takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to, as a leader, to say, I am on the journey. I'm on the train to make this change, no matter what that change is. But certainly when it's maybe a more left of centre topic and something you're trying to implement that is very different to the way that people usually work within in an organisation. But it's about partnering with them and holding their hand and supporting them, but also holding them really accountable to the outcomes they wish to receive at the end of the project or at the end of working together. So often we will start at the end point and look at what would a kind workplace be? What would it smell like? What would it feel like? How would people be in that workplace, in that kind workplace. And then we look at what an unkind workplace would look like. Less laughter, more people leaving, more work cover or return to work claims for injury. We've actually just had a new code of practice brought in Australia for psychosocial hazards and minimising risks around that, which is absolutely amazing. But I feel that the more that businesses realise the risk of not doing anything, then the risk of actually going on the journey and implementing change is far higher to just sit there and keep doing what you're doing than it is to actually try something new. And it may not work 100% of the time, because humans are humans. You know, we all show up to work probably differently every day, but if we have a shared overarching set of values that we actually live and breathe and adhere to, and that we are held accountable to, then that journey makes it a little bit easier, because you can actually have those courageous conversations along the way and say, hey, look, at the beginning of the project, this is what we wanted to achieve. So this is our end game. These are the values, these are the behaviors, these are the types of humans we want to have to reach that end game and that end goal. So you agreed to these because we co-designed them. So how do we, on that journey, keep people engaged and interested in the process? And it's by empowering them to take ownership over their own workplace culture. And I believe that anybody within an organisation can actually be responsible for, it's not just HR, it's not just the leaders, it's not just the board, it's everybody's responsibility to take responsibility for how they show up and for calling out people who don't adhere to what has been agreed upon at the beginning. So it is a journey. And I'm assuming that you are similar in the way that you work.
For sure, that you know, you don't go in and do a 3-hour workshop and have changed the culture, that it is long-term buy-in at all levels. Absolutely. I'm curious, you know, you think at the onset of the conversation, my sense was that you feel the biggest impediment to us experiencing more joy and happiness and kindness in the workplace is that we're all overwhelmed. And I often talk about how our brains are not able to be in a state of anxiety and stress and empathy simultaneously. I imagine you could replace empathy and put kindness there, and the same would hold. But we're like working within a sort of a chronic state of change and anxiety and stress, whether it's inflation or whether it's like the downturn of the economy or COVID or whatever's going on. So, you know, it's kind of set up, the system is engineered to like kind of squeeze out kindness. So I'm wondering, in any of your workplace experiences, whether or not you could share a story of a positive outcome of something like, wow, I'm so happy that happened.
Yeah, actually I can't. Well, there's a few, actually. One of the most simple things where people often think that to implement more kindness or more empathy or more of the traditional soft skills within a workplace, that it's going to cost a lot of money. But it's not. It's actually about commitment and consistency. And it might be the smallest of things. So in the workplace where I was working quite a while ago now, because I've realised that I've actually been doing this work unintentionally until I started my own business and intentionally stepped more into it. But I took over a team, and the team wasn't working very cohesively. It was very much, you just go and do your work, and where I'm probably not interested in what you're doing, but as long as you're getting the work done, that's all I care about. And then I took the team over, and I lead very differently. So I love to know the people that I have working with me and for me. I love genuinely connecting with people and knowing about what makes them tick. And I love seeing people lit up by doing something that really aligns with who they are and doing something that they want to be doing. So they were kind of the three things that I went into that role to, I guess, role model and to bring more of. So when I took this team over, there was a young girl who was working in another part of the business. And I said to my CEO at the time, I said, I really feel like she has these amazing skills, and I've noticed her, because my thing when I'm in the office, and even now I do it as a consultant, I will go around the office and I will say good morning to everybody around the office. I get to know their name. I get to know what they've been up to. I get to know their family sort of information just on the surface, just so I can ask them questions and know that I care about them. And I said to my CEO at the time, I would really love to bring her into my team. She's working in a completely different team. And he said to me, I don't understand. He said, I just, she's working okay in that team. I don't see how she could really fit into your team. And I said, because she has the right way of working with other people. I see her interacting with other people. And so I actually earmarked her, and I went and had a chat to her, and I said, look, I've got this position that I'm potentially creating. Is this of interest to you? And she actually said to me, I didn't finish year 12, which is like the final year in school. And she said, I never thought that I would be offered. I'm going to be emotional because she was beautiful. I didn't think that I would ever be able to do something that really made me excited, and that's something I really wanted to do. And she said, I have never had somebody actually say to me or believe in me and say, I think that you can do this, and I'm going to support you and hold your hand to help you be the best version of yourself. And so she came into the team, she did a traineeship, she stayed for about 18 months. And then when I left, she's like, well, if you're going, I'm going. Which was so lovely. But then she went traveling. So I encouraged her to go traveling, and now she's working in the UK and working over there. But for me, I then transposed that experience of when people feel seen and they feel heard and they feel that they matter and that you're genuinely interested in them, then they will do anything to be more engaged, to be more responsible, to help other people, the flow-on effect. And so that's a really individual one-on-one experience, but that's what I then try to create within businesses, to say, these are the incremental changes that you can make within your business that will have this huge impact and huge flow-on effect where you can actually impact people's lives. And do you take the time even just to say hello in the morning and get to know the person as a human? They're not just a number. So that was a really important one for me, because we still stay in touch, and she's doing amazing. But when it's on a larger scale in a business, that's when you get the teams together and you have those really open conversations around, what are we wanting as a team? Who are we? And how do we connect on that deep level? And some people will hop off that train. Some people will self-select out because it's too difficult for them. But some people will be like, thank you. I've been waiting for this. This is amazing. And so I've worked with clients that have had that kind of experience where they've shown up differently as a kinder leader because they show themselves self-kindness. And I had another lady who did this within a really difficult workplace. And she said, all the work that we did as part of some one-on-one mentoring, actually we did, she said, I now have had a promotion. I now show up with boundaries. I have more energy, and I feel like I am the leader that I was born to be. And those are the moments that drive me, deeply.
So Sophie, I noticed you do breath work, and you even have a tattoo that I noticed on your forearm that says breathe. So I wonder, what does that all have to do with the kindness revolution that you're igniting or trying to?
When I talk about self-kindness for leaders or for humans in general, the more we take care of ourselves and the more that we are aware of what we need and how we show up in a workplace and in life, but mainly in a workplace because that's where I tend to spend most of my time. There is so much attached to, when we work, and looping it back to, a lot of leaders don't want to seem as though they don't have it all together and that they're not coping. And so what I teach with my breath work is some really simple tips and tricks on what leaders, when they are under pressure, when they're feeling overwhelmed, when they might be anxious about something, when they're running on lower energy than normal, what I do is bring into my training and programs is a certain way that people can then do these things quietly, so that potentially they don't seem like they're feeling anxious or overwhelmed. And breathwork is a really, really good way of quietly bringing it all back into your center, turning inwards and actually reconnecting with your heart and your intuition. And I talk about intuition a lot as well, because I believe that intuitive leaders are powerful leaders, because if you have a knowing and then you match that with your learned and your knowledge, your learned information and your knowledge, that is a super powerful balance of deep-seated flow and then life experience on top of that. But breathwork for me has, because I actually have high functioning anxiety myself, and so I was looking for ways that I could still lead effectively and take care of myself at the same time. And breathwork has been very powerful for me. So when I go and do speaking, breathwork works for me as well.
So what is an example of some breath work for people who are really new to this? Like, what's a simple practice people could do?
I'll give you two. So the first one is box breathing, which has been amazing. You probably know about box breathing, but but you can do it in longer as well. So if you extend it out even to 6 or 7, being able to slow that breath down to actually then center yourself more. And you really only need to do 3 to 5 rounds of it, and you'll notice that you start to become more grounded in your energy. So that's the first one. So if I explain to people what that is if you breathe in for, say, either 4, 5 or 6, you can even extend it if you have really good, good at holding your breath, but breathe in for the count of, we'll say 5, hold for the count of 5, out for the count of 5, and then hold for the count of 5. And we actually do this with my kids as well. So our boys have learned to do breath work when they're feeling anxious or upset or overwhelmed. It's a really good way of doing the work, the inner work. The second one is actually a really interesting one. So the longer your exhale is, the more you will kick in your parasympathetic nervous system and activate your vagus nerve, or the group of nerves, the nerve ending, and it will actually reduce your stress and anxiety hugely. I didn't really believe it until I started doing it, and now I do it religiously, particularly when I'm going into a stressful meeting or have got some difficult conversation. I even do it when I'm at home and I'm a bit overwhelmed and stressed. I'm like, right, let's do some breath work. So if you say breathe in for the count of 4, and then you breathe out for double that amount. So as long as your exhale is probably 2 to 3 breaths longer than the inhale, you're going to start to then have an impact on your nervous system and really start to reduce the stress and anxiety. And that's a really good one for people to do. So say you breathe in for 4, and then you just breathe straight out for 8. You breathe in for 4, and breathe out for 8 again. And you don't think you can do 8, breathing out for 8, but you'd be surprised that as you're doing it, everything's slowing down and it becomes a lot easier.
Love it. Those are 2 great pieces of breath work tips. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Sophie, let me ask as a final question. This has been delightful, and thank you for making the time. I ask at the end a delicious question. I find it delicious anyways.
I love this.
If you can think of a time in your life when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
So many times. I think that probably one of the biggest things for me was working in a workplace, and I'll give you a specific example, but I was working with this amazing CEO, and I was having some problems with my husband being really unwell mentally. He's doing really well, by the way, now, my husband. But what I found so powerful was that when I had the courage to be vulnerable and to open up to this person who I knew him, but I didn't know. I mean, I never am very close with people within a workplace just because of my own being in HR. You kind of have to stay quite neutral. But I opened up to him and I said, I'm having these problems at home, and I need to start working some flexible hours so that I can help, with the kids and that kind of thing. The way in which he sat with me and held space for not only me as a human, but my story, and then said, whatever you need, you do. Your job will not be affected by your request for some flexibility, because I know that you are committed and that you love your work and that you love the people that you work with, and that you need this time for you. And that was a game changer for me, because I had never actually had a leader who I felt understood me human to human. And when someone can sit with you and not only hold that space, but then validate and support what you need, that is purposeful empathy right there.
I think I love asking this question because it's always a reminder to me that I can carry out my day and find occasions to practice purposeful empathy. And I hope that it's an invitation for anybody who's watching and listening to do the same. I never know the story that I'm going to get. And I always know that it's very heartfelt from the person telling it, because they know who they're thinking of. They know the example of the moment. And we all do. And so kindness and purposeful empathy, they're brothers and sisters, they're cousins, they're twins, whatever you want to say about those two. We can all turn up the volume of them in our lives, right? And why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we, Sophie?
Yes,
Right?
I agree. I'm like, it's not rocket science.
Well, it would be great to hang out with you on Bondi Beach, or well, I know you're not in Sydney, but
on the beach somewhere.
On a beach somewhere, sipping a glass of white wine. Thank you for making the time. Say hi to your husband for me, and your son, who just, what did you say? You had his...
he just had his school sports day. He's 6, so he just got into the finals, and then he got 5th. But what I loved is he ran really hard, and then he waved at me when he finished, so he was happy with himself. So that's good. Yeah. So thank you actually for pushing this back a little bit so that I could watch him do his race. I really appreciated that.
Gosh, my pleasure. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
Thank you so much for watching an episode of Purposeful Empathy. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to the channel and also consider picking up your copy of Purposeful Empathy. It's an invitation to dial up empathy in your life. The world needs more empathy. We need more empathy. What are you waiting for?